When I was 12 years old, I learned that a house can be full of people and still feel empty. My name is Lily Carter, and after my mother passed away, it was just me and my father for 2 years. We lived in a small white house at the edge of town, where the roses my mother planted still bloomed every spring. My father tried his best to stay strong for me, but grief had made him quiet. Some nights I could hear him crying behind his bedroom door. Then one summer afternoon, he came home holding the hand of a woman named Vanessa, with her daughter Chloe beside her. Vanessa was beautiful, polished, and smiling, while Chloe stood silently in her pink dress. I wanted to believe this meant happiness had finally returned to our home. 3 months later, they moved in. At first, Vanessa was sweet whenever my father was around. She baked pies, laughed loudly, and called me darling. But the moment he left for work, her smile disappeared. She ordered me to wash dishes, scrub floors, pack Chloe's lunch, fold laundry, and feed their spoiled little dog, Princess. Chloe never helped. She simply sat scrolling through her phone, smirking while I worked. At dinner, Vanessa praised Chloe for everything and told my father I had become rude and difficult. My father, exhausted from working long hours at the factory, believed her. Every time he asked me to be respectful, it felt like losing him all over again. Soon Vanessa took away my bedroom, the room my mother had painted pale yellow with a shelf full of my favorite books. She gave it to Chloe because it had better sunlight and sent me to live in the attic. The attic smelled of dust and old wood. In winter, it froze. In summer, it burned with heat. Rain pounded so loudly on the roof that I could barely sleep. Still, I told myself to be patient. Things became worse after my 13th birthday. 2 weeks before, Vanessa had thrown Chloe a huge party with balloons, cake, and even a rented pony. But on my birthday, she handed me a broom and told me the hallway needed cleaning. My father only looked uncomfortable and walked out the door. That night, I cried until I could hardly breathe. After that, I spent more and more time at the library after school, pretending to study because I did not want to go home. Mrs. Harper, the librarian, noticed. One evening, she placed a warm cookie beside me and gently said that silence often tells louder stories than words. Her kindness broke something open inside me, and I finally told her everything. She listened carefully and then said that strength does not mean suffering forever. I did not understand her then, but those words stayed with me. Winter came early that year, and the attic became unbearable. One freezing night, I went downstairs for an extra blanket and heard Vanessa and Chloe laughing in the living room. Chloe mocked me, saying I still believed my father loved me. Vanessa replied that soon he would not have time for me at all because once they sold the house, they would be gone. My heart nearly stopped. The house had belonged to my mother before she died. It was meant to stay in our family. Vanessa then showed Chloe a folder and bragged that my father had already signed most of the papers. Terrified, I ran back upstairs. The next morning, I skipped school and went to the town records office. I remembered my mother once taking me there, and somehow I knew I needed help. An older clerk listened kindly as I explained. After checking the files, he frowned and said there was a pending transfer request, but the signature did not look right. He quietly admitted it might be fake. I ran straight to the library and told Mrs. Harper everything. She immediately made calls to a lawyer friend, someone in property records, and neighbors who had known my mother. For the first time in years, adults were taking my pain seriously. That evening, when I returned home, Vanessa was furious. She demanded to know where I had been and accused me of lying. Then she raised her hand to strike me. Before she could, the front door opened and my father stepped inside. He froze at the sight of her hand in the air and tears on my face. Vanessa nervously claimed she was only disciplining me, but I finally found my voice. Trembling, I told my father everything: the chores, the attic, the insults, my ruined birthday, and the forged papers to steal the house. Vanessa screamed that I was lying, but then there was another knock at the door. Mrs. Harper entered with a police officer and a lawyer. The lawyer laid documents on the table and announced they had evidence of forged signatures and attempted fraud. Vanessa's face turned white. Chloe burst into tears. Moments later, the officer escorted them both out of the house while they shouted excuses. When the door finally closed, the house became silent. My father sank into a chair, covered his face, and whispered that he had failed me. I wanted to stay angry forever, but grief had already stolen one parent from me, and I could not bear to lose another. I told him that he had believed her and that he had not seen me. He cried then, real broken tears, and promised that he saw me now. Healing was slow. He moved me back into my old bedroom and painted the walls yellow again. Together, we cleaned out the attic and donated what was stored there. He worked fewer hours, and we began eating dinner together without shouting or fear. Sometimes I was still angry, and sometimes forgiveness felt impossible. But he never stopped trying. Spring returned, and the roses outside bloomed brighter than ever. On my 14th birthday, I came downstairs to find the kitchen covered in streamers and candles. My father wore a crooked paper hat and smiled nervously as he wished me a happy birthday. There was cake, presents, and laughter that felt strange at first because it had been missing for so long. Later that evening, I sat on the porch with Mrs. Harper and asked if scars ever disappear. She smiled gently and said no, but they stop hurting when touched. Years have passed since then. I am 17 now, stronger than the frightened girl who once shivered alone in the attic. I volunteer at the library, after school, and help children who need safe places to breathe. Sometimes people ask if I hate my stepmother. I do not. Hatred would mean she still lives inside me. Instead, I remember this. Cruel people can steal comfort, peace, and trust for a while, but they can never steal who you become after surviving them. And every spring, when the roses bloom beside our little white house, I know my there would be proud. Not every home is filled with love, so never let someone else's hate define your worth. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe for more emotional stories.